We're definitely taught that you shouldn't have to give up yourself.
Their spouse is going to just be the center of joy and happiness.
I know that that can sound like scary or intimidating. We're going to get a little spicy today.
You're listening to Let's Get Knotty,
a podcast for real talk and honest conversations about all things relationships and marriage. The good, the bad, and the naughty.
Whether you're already married, almost married, or wanting to get married, we're here to help you build a solid foundation for a love that lasts. Let's get naughty, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Get Knotty.
Welcome, guys. We're going to get a little spicy today.
Yeah, we're going to share some controversial opinions and maybe just some things that you wouldn't think that would be good advice for marriage.
Yeah, I love this trend in general on the internet right now, like unpopular opinions on certain topics. So we figured it would be fun to take our unpopular opinions on marriage. We took some time to think about what our unpopular opinions are, like ways in which we have beliefs and opinions about marriage that are maybe a little bit countercultural. The ironic thing is I feel like maybe a lot of what we share is that, but we've got some unpopular opinions to share.
Yeah, I think we teach a lot of things that might not be what you hear, at least when you're, hearing about marriage and when you're in the office and people are complaining about marriage and, the old ball and chain
right
around the office. And
sure.
I feel like this was a fun exercise to kind of collect some just random thoughts that we've had that you definitely won't hear out there.
Yeah. Should we start?
Yeah, let's jump in. Okay.
Number one, it's not your spouse's job to make you happy.
Yeah, this is I think a lot of people can hear that and say, oh, that makes sense. But that is something that I don't think anyone going into marriage expects. I think everyone has, that hole, and they think that, just being in love, like that their spouse is going to just be the center of joy and happiness and all things good for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even if people hear that and say that to be true, they still put the weight of their happiness on their spouse. And so many marriages are built upon, I'm here for you to make me happy, and I will leave if you're not making me happy. That's truly the agreement in a lot of marriages, most marriages in our world right now, I would say. And so,
yeah, the wedding vows shouldn't read until death do us part. It's until I'm no longer happy with you.
Yeah, for sure. And so we have found we've been really blessed in our marriage by not placing the weight of happiness on each other. And I think it's really important to say, you make me super happy. Our marriage is no question one of the absolute greatest sources of joy and happiness in my life. We have a lot of happiness in our marriage, but I think it's kind of one of those paradoxical things where when you take the pressure and the expectation of happiness off your marriage, you get more happiness out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. And I think it's something that has been a part of our relationship. I think this is totally something that maybe I struggle with sometimes too, is just putting that expectation on your spouse, that your happiness is connected to them and really their performance or, how they love you, or if they, how marriage plays out meets what your expectations were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've definitely talked about this concept in different ways in other episodes. I know we did talk about this with the Mathenis in episode 6 in their interview. They had a lot of insight into how they've applied this concept to their marriage, but just the idea of being filled up and feeling whole, in finding your joy and satisfaction in the Lord, and then bringing that fullness to your marriage and letting that add upon your joy together. But if you expect your spouse to fill the emptiness that is in you because it's there, because you're a human, your marriage will crumble under the weight of that expectation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good illustration is, like if you're expecting your spouse to pour into you and then you have to pour into your spouse, like eventually water's going to spill and there's not going to be enough to keep pouring into each other. And so finding that joy, in our belief from the Lord and, like having joy and happiness and then getting to constantly pour that into your spouse is a way better perspective than, hey, I need you to just keep filling me up. It's we always want people to put deposits into us, but we aren't always depositing into other people.
Yeah, and I think knowing that the goal, not just it's not your job to make me happy, but the goal of our marriage isn't just happiness. And right. So, we've talked about this too, like having a deeper purpose for your marriage, because there will be plenty of days in your marriage that aren't so happy. And so if that's the only goal and outcome in which your marriage is a success and has a purpose, I mean, that marriage ain't going to last very long, because hard times come and tough days come. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And I liked your description that you are going to crush your spouse under those expectations and that weight, and they're never going to live up to that. And that's just it's going to be really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So your spouse should bring you a lot of joy, but don't make it their job to make you happy.
Yeah.
Look, y'all, with divorce rates near 50%, there is no question getting married is one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make.
That is why we created Ready to Knot, our premarital course to help you build a solid foundation for a lasting marriage.
You'll take the world's leading relationship assessment, get a personalized report on the strengths and growth areas of your relationship, and watch lessons where we help you understand your results and give you tools and exercises to grow in 9 different areas.
This is designed to give you structure to have the important conversations you need to have and to get clear on your expectations in everything from finances to family, conflict, sex, roles, faith, and so much more.
Research has proven that investing your time in a course like this will increase your marriage success rate by 30%. Don't just prepare for your wedding day. Invest time preparing for the lifelong marriage that will follow it.
And if you're already married, can we just say that this would make an amazing wedding gift? With Ready to Knot, we'll help you move into marriage with clarity and confidence.
And a special discount just for Let's Get Knotty listeners, go to knottedmarriage.com/ready-to-knot and use code LGK25 for $25 off. That's knottedmarriage.com/READYTOKNOT and use code LGK25 for $25 off.
Now back to the episode.
Our second unpopular opinion is that you don't have to have everything in common with your spouse or significant other. I think this is something that, especially talking to premarital couples, like we hear all the time where they're like, oh my gosh, it's like we're the same person, or we have all of these things in common.
Yeah, we have so much in common.
And then like we talk to people who are early married and they're like, I married a crazy person. Like this person has nothing in common with me. And I think that's a bad baseline to be looking at if you're trying to marry someone is, do they have everything in common with me?
Yeah. I mean, we've shared resources in which we believe there are definitely certain things that you have to have in common and be on the same page about and be unified in. But we've absolutely learned the beauty in two different people coming together with differences and different strengths, and learning how to celebrate how we're different, even though a lot of times it drives us crazy. Like, there are so many times I wish that you were more like me, you thought more like me, your brain worked more like mine. You wanted to solve problems the way I did.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. You have to have certain core values and beliefs align to have a good marriage. But really, you know, I think people who have a 50-point checklist when they're looking through what someone has to have, I don't believe that. And I don't think it has to align to everything that you have. The point being that marriage is about growth, and that marriage is going to challenge you to grow. And so your spouse being different from you is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to grow them, well, for you to grow yourself and for them to grow themselves. You can't really grow your spouse.
No, but you can definitely be a sharpening tool, and that's what our spouses do for us. They help us grow. But yeah, you can't change your spouse. They have to change on their own.
Yeah, and to kind of add to that, like, for people who are married, I think the differences we have from our spouse can drive us crazy.
Yeah, that's what I was starting to say earlier. Like, there are so many times I catch myself being like, dang, I want to just over something that you're different from me on. But there's no question that is like where so much of the strength of our marriage comes from, is how we're different. And that's how I have been sharpened to grow, because of how you're different from me.
Yeah, and so I think that's a good question to ask in your marriage is, hey, the areas that we're different, is that something that drives us crazy, or is that something we can sit down and be like, wow, like, thank you, God, for putting me with a person who's so different from me.
Yeah. And something you say all the time is that so often what you're attracted to in your partner is quickly after you get married what becomes the thing that drives you crazy, because oftentimes it is those differences that you are attracted to, but then they drive you nuts because you just wish they were more like you.
That happens all the time. It's all the ways that you're different than me, I appreciate so much, and I love them, but they also drive me bonkers.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something we see a lot, is just that language of like, oh, we have so much in common. Like, I found my perfect mate because we're the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, being able to celebrate that you don't have to be the same, there's a lot of beauty in marriage that comes from that.
Yeah. So I think whether you're dating or you're married, I think finding those differences and just finding ways to appreciate them is just a really good strategy for loving each other well.
Yeah.
And just appreciating, like, understanding how your marriage can be stronger together, right? Like, what can you guys do better? You know, there's skills that I have that Molly doesn't. And there's things that, well, all right, there's a few things that I do better than Molly. And then there's everything else that Molly does better than me.
We have been able to try to find ways in our life to like celebrate that and hone that and come together as a team and like really tangibly in like business, for example. But in just like day-to-day married life, a lot of times it's harder to see that, because a lot of times in daily married life, you just want your spouse to do things the way that you do them, you know? So I think, as crazy as it is, like, doing business together has helped us kind of like learn to celebrate that in our marriage more as well. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I think like working and problem solving are really good examples of how we operate so differently. I am very problem oriented, and Molly is very like
process oriented.
Process and like life, like everything in life has to still be functioning. Like for me, if there's a problem, we don't eat, sleep, drink water or anything until we solve the issue and we get the problem done. You know, like we get that problem solved.
Yeah.
Where when Molly has a problem in her life, she's like, well, to solve this problem, I'm going to
Clean the
wake
house.
up, clean the house, get together, have my quiet time, drink a matcha, go work out, do all of the other checklist items. I'm going to time block. My calendar isn't colored right now to work on problem solving, so I can't do it until 2 p.m.
Anyone that watches my vlogs is lolling right now because you're describing my days.
Yeah, that's like how Molly works. And so she's like, this problem will be handled over the next week in 2-hour increments. And I'm like, all right, like we're not sleeping till we get this problem done. And we drive each other crazy about this.
Insane. Like, yeah, absolutely. But I think we have learn to try to celebrate that in each other and like know that neither is right and somewhere in the middle is where we can land. But I think it's just a beautiful thing to celebrate. Like we are wired so differently. I 100% believe that is like innate from the Lord, a difference between men and women, because both need to happen in a family. Like if you're out solving problems, like you literally have such tunnel vision that like nothing else happens. And like if you were left alone to care for children in a family, like they would be crying and starving and you'd have no idea. Like you are just oblivious.
Let's just say I'm not in charge of feeding our dog or our dog would be dead.
Cashmere literally has left our dog in the office because Gunner goes to the office with Cashmere every day. If you've never heard this, it is as amazing as it sounds. He's the office mascot. He gets to go to work every day. But one time recently you came home and I was like, where's Gunner? You're like, oh no, I left him at the office. Like that is how your mind was so preoccupied with what you were working on and thinking about. You literally drove all the way home without realizing he was not in the car.
So I have a confession this week that my coworkers have called me out because they're tallying it, that they knew I was really distracted this week because I let Gunner out to go to the bathroom 3 times this week and left him out there just like chilling on his own. And
you can't do that. Remember when he got lost?
Yeah, he ran over one time.
Oh my! I'm gonna have a heart attack just thinking about that again. That's a story for another time.
But now he was just hanging outside there, and so
you're just now telling me that you've been like neglecting our fur child?
Well, I figured if I tell you while we're on the podcast, you can't be that upset. Not that you would be, but
well, I'm just glad he's home and safe.
I'm just letting everyone make sure that you handle this with grace and love.
This is a really far tangent from our second unpopular opinion about not having to have everything in common. But I really I think this is relevant. Just I've learned to appreciate even when your short-sightedness drives me insane. I really truly believe that we were wired differently and the Lord wants us to work together and build a family together because we can both take care of different needs, and that's part of our wiring. And so just learning to celebrate differences and know that they can make you stronger instead of drive you insane.
Well, I'm thankful you're celebrating that I left Gunner outside 3 times.
I'm not celebrating that, but I will love you through it.
Okay.
Number 3, we've hardly talked about sex.
Wow, wow.
We've hardly talked about sex or intimacy on the podcast yet. And we have plenty to say about it. So we'll definitely have to do episodes just about that. But do you want to share number 3?
Yeah. The best sex is in the best marriages, baby.
That's right. And so this is an unpopular opinion because so much of what we see is that great sex makes a good marriage. And we know basically the opposite to be true. Great physical intimacy happens because of great intimacy in other areas of your marriage as well. And
yeah, I mean, great physical intimacy is typically following great spiritual intimacy, great emotional intimacy. I mean, guys, like if you want to have great physical intimacy, that's a great place to start.
Yeah. There's a reason why, I mean, again, like men and women are wired so differently, but I do believe that that's part of our design. Like you knowing that desiring better physical intimacy with me, like you start by pursuing me emotionally and spiritually, and that leads to more of the physical as well. And I think, I just think it's so important to know that, like we say, the best sex is in the best marriages, because a healthy marriage is what creates an environment for great sex. It's not the other way around. Like good sex cannot save a bad marriage. It's a great tool. And I know that it was created as a gift to use as a unifying tool and to strengthen our bond and to do all these amazing things, but it cannot make up for lack in all these other areas of your marriage.
Yeah. And sex is going to be dynamic and changing, and you're going to have times when it's a strength and times when it's not. If you're not communicating, if you don't have great intimacy, and if you're bitter with each other, I mean, the truth is, I mean, after the romance is worn off, right, then it's about your intimacy and connection that is leading to physical intimacy. It's not about flaming passion.
Right. Yeah. That is not sustaining.
No, it's really not. And I mean, I think it's also a circle. I mean, we've talked about how like emotional and spiritual intimacy leads to physical intimacy, but something we've also talked about is our physical intimacy can lead to more spiritual and emotional intimacy.
Right. And they all build upon each other. And so that's not to say that you like one leads to the other and not the other way around. Like they all build upon each other. But I just think this is an unpopular opinion because it's just not what we're taught in our generation, in our society. It's just there's such an emphasis that good sex leads to a good marriage, and that's just not true.
Yeah. And you also need to communicate about it. Like there's a reason that people in their mid-50s are peaking at sexual satisfaction, which is freaking weird. That people in their 50s are getting it on at the best level. Like they are the happiest with their sex lives.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I know that I'm sure we could read articles about like all the reasons why, but my brain just automatically assumes that it's because, one, they've built a deeper like connection. 2, they've learned to communicate better about it. And 3, I think it's not, I'm assuming that people in their 50s aren't having like the wildest, craziest, most flaming sex, but they're the most satisfied in their sex lives because their level, like their measurement of satisfaction has changed, I'm guessing, like.
Yeah, they're measuring it based off of intimacy and not trying to have what did you describe it as?
I don't know.
You had some flaming something wild.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, I think culture projects this image that like the best sex is a certain thing when really in marriage we know that it's not. Like it's
all right, I'm still stuck on what you said. Hey, babe, how's our sex been? Flaming.
Is that a good thing?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Like, I feel like you didn't know how to like describe it, so you went with the word flaming.
I think I'm thinking of like spicy.
Spicy.
Anyways, we can move on. Next unpopular opinion is that mutual sacrifice is the heartbeat of a lasting union. I just think this is so important because, again, unpopular opinion being like countercultural. we're just taught that like happiness, which we already touched on, but like happiness and joy and a great marriage comes from getting everything that you want out of it. And I think that we've just learned how important it is to approach your marriage from that. I'm going to laugh now every time I try to use the word like humble or humility.
Put it in the jar.
I can't talk about marriage without talking about humility. It does. They can exist separate from each other. So you're going to hear a lot of it.
So here's the question that I have: is mutual sacrifice just really because I wouldn't accept the word humility as a point we can do? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, I could have just made this humility is the answer. No, I mean, yes, they go together, but I just think that so much of what we've seen culture talk about with marriage is like, I mean, you even mentioned at the beginning, like the whole like ball and chain idea and just like being tied down and like marriage and starting a family and kids and like all this stuff is just talked about as like sacrifice and, giving up your freedoms and all of this stuff. But that like knowing that like sacrifice, so like just laying down of your selfishness, I know that can sound like scary or intimidating, but what we know to be true is that when you do that mutually and you both come to your marriage from this place of like, hey, I want to serve you and love you and give myself to you. When two people do that, it's just like the most amazing thing.
Yeah, where did we recently see that like psychologists say that for every negative experience you have with someone, you have to have 5 positive experiences to replace it?
Yeah.
And so, I think that's where we fail in marriages. We don't realize that we need to give and give and give and rarely take from marriage. Like that you need to be depositing in the other person consistently, because when you make withdrawal, it's pretty big and it can be really hurtful. And so I think that's just a interesting number that you have to sacrifice 5 times for every time that you are pulling at something out of the marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're definitely taught that you shouldn't have to give up yourself, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, another unpopular opinion that we didn't even put on the list, but I actually talk about this a lot and I feel very strongly about it. Like the idea that like you shouldn't change, like marriage shouldn't change you. You don't have to change for your partner. Absolutely not true. Our unpopular opinion is that you should change and marriage should change you and your spouse should change you, because the whole point of marriage and life is to grow and become better and become a better. Like my goal in life is to every day become and look more like Jesus. And I hope and pray that our marriage and you help me to do that. So side tangent, extra bonus for you guys there. Unpopular opinion.
This is like the tangent show.
Seriously, I'm sorry. But I think, where was I even going with that? How did I get on that?
I'm not sure.
Oh, jeez. I know we were talking about mutual sacrifice. Oh, that's what I was saying. Is like they're along with. I swear, I'm like staying on track. I'm just kidding.
You're monologuing.
Sorry. Okay, I'll stop. I'm just saying there's definitely with that idea, there's a lot of talk about like not having to give of yourself. Like you shouldn't have to compromise yourself, or you know what I mean? Just like You shouldn't have to sacrifice, and like
they should just fit in this little box in your life.
Yes. Like your marriage should just add to your life that's already great and perfect. And like, yeah, they should fit inside this box where like, yeah, that's just so false and so not true. And so we just know that sacrificing self when in mutual sacrifice is, I mean, it's everything.
All right. So our last unpopular opinion is something I'm really excited to end on, because we talk a lot here about like the hard parts of marriage and what's hard. But our last point is marriage is hard, but it's really rewarding.
Yeah.
And, kind of going back to those conversations where, oh, marriage is a dream killer. Like we all hear the talk that your life is over when you get married, and oh, your wife doesn't allow you to have fun. Well, maybe I just work in an office with a lot of guys, and like that talk is thrown around.
Yeah.
But like what you don't hear about is the great moments and the great joys that come from fighting through those hard feelings and fighting through the hard things, and that produces a lot of joy and happiness.
Yeah.
I think something that people don't realize is when something, things that are worth it are typically not easy, and they don't come easy. And think about something that you've accomplished that was really easy. Was it fulfilling? Like maybe a little bit, but what about that thing like you had to work and work and work and work, and it's with someone who you love, and as you work and grow, you start to have this joy come out of it, and it's like we are building this together. And there's a lot of joy and reward in that.
Yeah. I feel like I'm on mute. I'm not sure what I have to add.
You're unmuted.
Okay.
Did I just epically knock it out of the park?
Yeah, I have nothing more to say.
Well, I think that's something that I just want to shift conversations about.
Yeah.
It's not just to always talk about where marriage is hard. I think talking about the hard parts of marriage, like we want to do that, but we also want to talk about how great marriage can be, because the cultural conversation around marriage is very negative, and it's not held at a high level. And I don't think a lot of people believe that like marriage can be rewarding.
Yeah. They just see the parts that they hope they get out of it, like happiness and a partner to have around and not be lonely. But it's I love that you pointed out, the old saying that like nothing worth having comes easy. And that's so true. Like the good and sweetest things in life are on the other side of putting in the work.
Yeah. So those are some of our unpopular opinions around marriage. We hope you guys appreciate it. Like, give us some of your thoughts. We want to know, is there anything you disagreed with, you liked, that you hadn't heard before? And we really like to hear your unpopular opinions.
Yeah.
Like what are things that stick out to you? And yeah, we'd like to hear that.
Yeah. We'll put a post on the Instagram when this episode goes live. Y'all can let us know your unpopular opinions. I really do think that probably a lot of our podcast episodes have our unpopular opinions on marriage. So if you enjoy this, definitely tune in for more, because we're constantly talking about unpopular, countercultural conversations around marriage. So
yeah, well, if you want to hear more of Molly's epilogues, what? All right. Well, if I knew the English language, it would help me a lot. But if you want to hear
monologuing,
Molly monologue, I had got it. I just couldn't remember what I said. Epilogue, monologue, same thing, right?
I'm sorry. I know those are a lot of tangents, but
okay,
I swear they were relevant.
Last tangent as we sign off. Molly speaks in like perfect English. Like she writes and speaks in perfect English. I've never seen her misspell anything.
I did get a perfect score on the ACT.
And English. I am like verbally dyslexic. And so
I mean, you are dyslexic.
I am dyslexic.
Yeah, that's absolutely a difference. But what do we even have to say about that? You just want the world to know.
Well, I just want everyone to know what the monster, like I am like on the opposites attract here.
Yeah.
And Molly is like the extreme opposite of me as being dyslexic.
To point this out, when we have like kind of prep for podcast episodes, we write out a little outline, and normally it's me doing most of the outlining, and I'm like writing full on sentences because I communicate the way that like my brainstorm is like how I would speak. And Katrin is like, what the actual heck? I can't read
I can't
this.
do that. I need like 2-word
Yeah.
bullet points like down like.
But this is worth taking a moment to celebrate. Everyone tell Cashmere how amazing he is as a podcast host, because you are dyslexic and you do see yourself as not being a great dictator and communicator, but I think you're killing it, and I'm so thankful that you're sharing your wisdom with the world.
Thank you. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on unpopular
Opinions
on marriage. I want to know if you guys think that Molly needs to stop monologuing now that I figured out what the heck the word is. I had to kind of divert for a second so I could remember what I was saying.
I will work on that. I'm sorry.
So tune in next week.
I have a lot to say.
Tune in next week to see if Molly continues monologuing.
I feel so called out.
Okay, bye. Thanks so much for hanging out with us for another episode of Let's Get Knotty.
Remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you want more encouragement, join us on Instagram and YouTube at Knotted Marriage to check out all the other resources we have to help you build a tighter marriage. If this conversation encouraged you in any way, please consider leaving us a review on whatever platform you're listening and posting a screenshot on social media. That support means more than you know and really helps us reach more couples.
We'll see you for next week's episode. Go get naughty.